If you're just getting started in photography, there's a chance that you're scouring YouTube trying to figure out what's the best camera to buy, what's the best lens to buy, what all do I need to start my photography journey. And there's a very good chance also that you're gonna be watching a bunch of videos and they're gonna tell you to buy the latest camera, the latest lens, the latest this, the latest that. And let me just be real with you, it's a bunch of stuff that you probably just don't need. So on today's video, I'm going to tell you what to buy, what not to buy, and what you really need to get started in your photography journey. If you don't know who I am Cameron. I am a wedding and portrait photographer based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm here to educate you on what to do in getting into photography. And the rest of my channels, gear reviews, how to take better pictures, all that jazz. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. So let's talk about the heart of the kit. Obviously, when you're starting photography, you're going to need two main things, a camera and a lens. You can't do much of anything without those. So let's talk about the types of cameras to choose from. There's going to be a lot of options out there. There's micro four thirds, there's APS-C or crop sensor, there's full frame, there's medium format, there's film cameras, there's DSLR, there's mirrorless. So what type of camera should you go with? There's so many to choose from. So I'm only going to talk about two types of cameras today. That's going to be APS-C or crop sensor and full frame, because those are going to be the most common cameras that we are probably going to choose from. So APS-C is going to be a smaller sensor than full frame. And basically the APS-C has a good sensor, but it does have some limitations in certain things, particularly in low light. Now, it does also have a crop factor on it, and we're going to talk about that when we get to the lenses. But a full frame is going to be your full 35 millimeter frame or sensor, full 35 millimeter sensor. And these are going to have different types of sensors. So whether it be regular CMOS, which is all around the board, and then you have backside illuminated, then you have stacked, and you have partially stacked, and then you have a bunch of other sensor technology, but all that stuff is just going to confuse you. So APS-C and full frame is really the ones that you want to look at to start out, in my opinion. Now with these APS-C and mirrorless cameras, there are going to be a bunch of different options to choose from, whether it be Sony, Nikon, Canon, Fuji, and I'm gonna tell you right now, the brand that you choose does not matter at all. But if you're in 2025 and you're starting photography, it really doesn't make sense to me if you're out here trying to buy a DSLR camera. I don't think it makes any sense to buy 17, 18, 20-year-old technology in 2025. There's a lot of mirrorless cameras with updated technology that are going to give you a lot better results, and it's going to be the same price, if not sometimes cheaper than them old DSLR cameras. So let's just look mirrorless for me, okay? And as far as which camera to buy, I think you should have a budget in mind and then pick your camera within that budget. Nowadays, all these cameras, they really do a good job with pretty much anything you want to do. Now, granted, I think you need to figure out what type of niche you want to go in. Do you want to go into weddings? Do you want to go into wildlife? Do you want to go into portraits? And I think making that decision of what your niche is going to be is going to help you better identify which camera you should go with, but that's something for you to decide. One last thing about the cameras, there's going to be cameras with single card slots, and then there's going to be cameras with dual card slots. So one SD card or two SD cards. And in my personal opinion, if you're doing anything photography related that involves money, like you want people to pay you for services, then I recommend getting the camera with two SD card slots for redundancy, just in case one fails, you have a backup. If you just want something to go out for fun, shoot some street, shoot some wildlife, then I think you'll be fine with a one SD card camera. Now let's talk about the lenses. Now this is really the important part of the kit. Now a lot of people are going to say you need the best camera, you need the Sony a7R5, you need a Canon R5 Mark II, but in reality, if you don't put a good lens on your camera, then the camera's worth nothing at the end of the day. You can buy a really old camera, but if you put a really good lens to it, that camera's going to make magic if you know how to use it, obviously. So when it comes to lenses, like I said, same thing with the camera, you need to start out with a budget and pick a lens within that budget. A lot of people are going to tell you to get a nifty 50 or 50 millimeter 1.8, and that's going to be your starting lens to go with. And I say that maybe, not all the time, but you remember when I talked about a little bit earlier about APS-C and full frame cameras? This is where the lens comes into account. So when it comes to APS-C sensor cameras, because it's a smaller sensor, it does have a crop effect. And what do I mean by crop effect? It means that whatever lens that you put on it is going to be multiplied by 1.5 or 1.6, depending on which system you're shooting with. And that's going to be the true focal length. So for instance, if you're shooting with a 35 millimeter lens on an APS-C sensor camera, 35 times 1.6 is going to be 54 millimeters, I believe. I don't have a calculator in front of me, but I think it's like 54 millimeters. 35 millimeters times 1.5 is going to be 52 millimeters. And so on the APS-C sensor camera, if you buy a 35 millimeter, you're actually kind of buying the nifty 50 because you're already getting that focal length. Now, if you're on a full frame camera, the lens you buy is the lens that you're shooting with. And that's the joy of shooting full frame versus crop sensor. Full frame is going to be better in low light, and it's going to have a true focal length for whatever you put on it, whatever lens you put on it. APS-C is going to be a little bit worse in low light, and you have to do math when it comes to the lenses. Now, kind of circling back, when it comes to which lens to buy, I am a prime shooter. I like prime lenses. Everybody doesn't like prime lenses, but if I were you, or if I was starting, again, I would probably buy a 35 millimeter lens, whether I'm on APS-C or whether I'm on a full frame. I think the 35 millimeter lens is one of the best focal lengths because it's versatile enough to be wide to get in tight environments, to get shots in tight environments if you want to do landscapes. And it's also really good at portraits as well, as long as you don't get too close to the subject, because then you might get some distortion. But I think the 35 millimeter lens is golden. Now, a 50 millimeter is going to be good too, but if you're on the APS-C, you're almost shooting at an 85. And if you're just starting, shooting at a tighter focal length is going to be a lot harder, but it will allow you to be a little more creative because then you're going to have to find your shots. Now, if you are on a full frame or APS-C, doesn't really matter, and you can swing it a 24-70 or a 17-70, depending on which sensor you're shooting on, I think that's going to be beneficial as well, because that's going to be really versatile. You're going to have a wide range of millimeters to work with. But the thing about that is the aperture is probably going to be 2.8 versus you're probably getting a 1.8 or 1.4 on a 35 or 50 on a prime lens. And so that's just something to keep in mind. Now, when it comes to the aperture, so when you get prime lenses or zoom lenses, you're going to see 1.4, 1.8, 2.8, and that's going to be the aperture or the depth of field that you're shooting at. So if you are shooting on an APS-C sensor camera, and like I said, you're shooting on a 35, so you multiply that at 1.5, you shoot on a 52, you're also going to have to multiply the aperture to get your true aperture, which you're shooting at. So you might buy a 35 millimeter 1.8, but in reality, if you're on a crop sensor camera, you're shooting at a 52, like 2.5 or 2.7, whatever the math is on that. So also keep that in mind. Moving on, the next thing you should buy is SD cards. Obviously, without SD cards, you're not gonna be able to take a picture. You're just gonna have a nice little camera and nothing to do with it. So SD cards are gonna be really important, but which type of SD cards should you buy? Now, the SD card brands, there's a lot of brands that are trusted, and you'll see a lot of brands like the Japanese brands and everything like that. The brands that I really recommend are Lexar and ProGrade, maybe another one, really just Lexar and ProGrade. I think that's really the only ones that I'll rock with. SanDisk is notorious for corrupting, and any other brand I just don't know if I really trust to keep it hot. And please don't buy those micro SD cards with the adapter and say, well, I got an SD card because it's cheap. You're gonna ruin your camera, you're gonna corrupt your SD card. Let's not do that. Buy once, cry once. Spend $50, $60 on an SD card because you want to make sure your pictures are safe. Especially, like I said, if you're getting to any type of work where you want people to pay you for your services, then you're gonna want an SD card that is reliable. So you're gonna wanna spend some money on an SD card and make sure it is something, reliable. Now, there's a bunch of SD cards to choose from. When it comes to the number on SD cards, you're gonna see V30, V60, V90, there's CF Express Type A, CF Express Type B. Now, in my personal opinion, I think V30s are going to be the baseline, I guess, of like what you want to buy. I personally wouldn't buy a V30. I would just upgrade it to a V60 because depending on what you're doing, you're probably going to be taking a lot of shots when you're first starting out, and you want the card to read pretty quick so your buffer isn't waiting, like you're not hitting your buffer and making your camera lag. So a V60 is going to be a little bit faster. V90, if you're doing any type of video, regardless of what you're doing, whether it be 422 10-bit, whether it be 4K 60, 4K 30, if you're doing any type of video, I recommend getting a V90. CF Express Type A or B, you're probably not buying a camera that has those cards access, but if you are, I don't think they're really necessary. I think you just get a V90 and call it a day. But Lexar, ProGrade, those are two of the brands that I love and use and that I trust. And just make sure you're getting a V60 or better. And protect your camera, protect your images, all that jazz. The next thing you're gonna buy is some extra batteries. So the camera's gonna come with one, but one battery is probably not gonna last you an entire day. So make sure you're buying some extra batteries, whether it be stock batteries or whether it be third-party batteries. Now, depending on the third-party batteries you buy, be careful, okay? So everybody's gonna tell you don't buy third-party batteries. I personally use third-party batteries all the time. I use third-party batteries by K&F, but only K&F. That's the only third-party battery I'll use. It's recognized as authentic in my camera, and I've never had an issue with it. I've shot on Canon and Sony. I've used K&F for both, and I've never had any issues. So make sure you buy some extra batteries, and then, yeah, extra batteries. Next thing you're gonna wanna get is a camera bag and a decent camera bag. Now, you're not gonna need a Peter McKinnon nomadic $300 camera bag to start out with. You're not gonna need the top of the line camera bag because in reality, you only have one camera and one lens. So you probably don't need a 35, 45 liter bag unless you just wanna say, hey, I'm buying this and I'm just growing to it, which I understand, totally fine, whatever, but probably not gonna need the biggest bag. I just did a video on a bag that I know and love, which is the Ulanzi BP10. You can go check that video up here if you want. But there's also a little brother called the BP09 for Ulanzi, and also PGY Tech has a nice little bag that I've used before as well. So these are some bags that are small, compact, and they don't look like camera bags. And now, why did I say that they don't look like camera bags? Wouldn't you want a bag that looks like a camera bag? Well, no, because then you're making yourself a target. You want something that looks like an everyday carry bag so that people aren't eyeing you and say, oh, that's a camera bag. I'm probably gonna rob him or rob her. Like, let's not be that one to, put a target on yourself and walk around with a camera like, yeah, I got the. It happens. I see, like, look up on YouTube, my gear got stolen. There's 1,000 videos about people's gear getting stolen. So let's not be that one, but get yourself a camera bag to protect your equipment. And if you want, which I recommend, get an air tag and put the air tag in the camera bag so you know where it is at all times. The next thing you're gonna wanna get is a camera cleaning kit. Yeah, camera cleaning kit. This is camera cleaning kit. You got this blower, blow some dust off your lens. You got the wipe, microfiber cloth, wipe the lens off. Keep your lens clean. If the lens gets dirty, it's gonna show up in your images and you're gonna be like, the camera sucks and really just your lens is dirty. So make sure you get a camera cleaning kit. These are super cheap. It's probably the cheapest thing that you're gonna get in your photography kit. It's like, I don't know, 10 bucks, 15 bucks. So just make sure you get one of those. Clean it every single time before you use it, just to make sure everything's good to go and clean, and you'll be good. The next thing you're gonna need is some storage and backup. I recommend SSDs. The one I use is Crucial SSD. This is one of my working drives. This is my 2 terabyte, and then I have a 4 terabyte plugged into the computer here. And then I also have another backup, which is a SanDisk, which I don't use anymore because SanDisk sucks. This is the one that didn't corrupt, but my other SanDisk corrupted. And then I have another hard drive here that I also use as a backup. Now, you're probably asking me, Cameron, why in the world do you have so many backups? Like, is it necessary to have this many, drives? And yes, the answer is yes, especially because what I do weddings. And when it comes to weddings, you don't want to be that photographer that loses the couple's work. So what I do is I back up the images on my working drive, and then I back them up to a bunch of different sources as well. Just in case my working drive goes out, I have backups. Now, you're probably not going to need 2, 3, 4 SSDs to start out with, but you do want an SSD to start out with, just one, right? Whether it be a 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte, 4 terabyte, you're going to want an SSD. And why am I saying SSD instead of a hard drive? So a hard drive like this one, like I just showed you earlier, a hard drive has a spinning mechanism within it and is easier to corrupt. So if you drop this one good time, or if it gets hit one good time, or if you're carrying your bag around and you drop your bag one good time, this can go kaplunk. And once that disk is corrupt, like this whole thing is corrupt. An SSD does not have one of those rotary things on the inside, so it's a lot harder to corrupt. So SSD is also going to be faster. The megabits per second read and write is going to be a lot faster, and they're a lot smaller typically, so it's easier to carry around, and it's really good or best for me to work off of. So SSD is something I definitely recommend. At least one. If you can get two, especially if you want to do paid work, but definitely at least one. Next, you're going to need a way to edit these pictures that you take, these amazing pictures that you take, these amazing videos that you take. You're going to need a way to edit them, because if you take all these pictures and you're like, well, I have no way in editing them, then like, what are we doing? So what I recommend is Lightroom Classic or a regular Lightroom, whatever you want to do. Is $15 a month, and it's a good way to load your pictures in, edit them, get the look you want. If you want to buy presets and add presets, you can do that. Speaking of presets, I'm gonna just do a shameless plug here. I do have my presets that I created. They are live and they are on my website, which are down in the description. I created 5 or 6 very nice, very clean presets that you can use for any type of situation, any type of skin tone, any type of environment. I really like those, so go down in the description and get those. But Lightroom is going to be a good way. Photoshop is going to be a good way to edit these pictures as well. If you do video, then that's kind of different. You can do like DaVinci, Final Cut Pro, and everything like that. Those are going to be a little bit more expensive, but those are going to be necessary for your editing workflow. So Lightroom for photographers, I think you need to get that, or Capture one of those. You need a way to edit your pictures. I recommend Lightroom because that's what I use, and that's what I know, and that's what I trust, and that's what I love. So I definitely recommend Lightroom. So now that we talked a little bit about what to buy, let's talk about what not to buy. So you're gonna see a lot of people, they're gonna have all this gear. You're gonna be like, man, you're gonna see their gear closets and you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, they have this. They have the 24-70 and the 15-35 and the 7200, and they have all the primes and the 1.2s and the 1.4s. But the thing is, you probably don't need all those, right? So don't buy all these lenses that you don't even know how to use. Like, get used to one focal length, get used to a 35, get used to a 50, get used to a 24-70. And then once you get that and the budget, you can budget for other things, then you can start adding in more lenses. The worst thing you want to do is get gas or gear acquisition syndrome, and you get all this stuff and you just don't use it, or you buy this stuff and you just don't know how to use it, like drones and all this other stuff. So stick to one thing, get acclimated to it, and then you can branch off into something else. Another thing that you don't want to buy, please, for everything that we know and love, do not buy these starter kits that you see on Amazon or whatever website that you go to for your camera, or Walmart. Like the kits that come with like a camera, a tripod, an SD card, and then it comes with like a telescope lens, and then it comes with a bag and a strap, and it comes with all this other stuff. Those kits are garbage, because all that stuff you're not even going to use. The only thing out of that you're going to use is the camera. So don't spend an extra $600-700 on a kit on stuff you're never going to use. Just buy the camera body alone, and then buy the lens alone, and then call it a day. Like, even if you're buying a camera with a kit lens, sometimes it's fine, but I don't recommend it. I recommend buying the body separate and then buying the lens separate and marrying them and then building off of that. And another thing you want to be careful not to buy is filters. I got sucked into the filter fanatic thing when I first started. I was like, oh my gosh, filters are so cool. I need NDs, I need black mist filters, I need CPL filters, I need this, I need that, I need that. And I just never used them. So don't be that one that buys all these filters, doesn't even know what to do with them or what they do, because that was me. So I'm just trying to protect you from being me. So make sure if you need to buy a filter, you know what it does and you know what you're going to use it for, or else you're just wasting money. But if you do buy a filter, make sure you're buying the biggest size possible, and then just using a step-up ring. So if your filter thread is like a 49, don't buy a 49mm filter. Buy an 82 and buy a 49 to 82mm step-up ring, so that when you buy more lenses, you can use that one filter on all lenses versus having to continue to buy filters. That's something I did as well. Don't be me. Okay, so with all that being said, photography is really all about who's behind the camera. It's not about the gear you buy. You can buy an 85-1.2 and an A7R5 or a Sony or a Canon R5 Mark II and your pictures still suck. It really comes down to, do you know the camera? Do you know lighting? Do you know composition? Do you know the exposure triangle? And so don't get wrapped up in all these YouTube videos about buy this gear and buy that gear and buy that gear. Start off with something that you're comfortable with. Start off with something in your budget, and then learn the photography, the all around photography, and then continue to grow off of that. If you found this video helpful, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. There'll be a lot more videos where this came from, and I appreciate every single one of you. And until next time, peace.